Good evening, everyone. It's good to see you all here at Grand Performances, right in the middle of downtown LA. My name is Rafael Gonzalez. I'm the president CEO of Grand Performances, and we are honored to be here this evening, to see all of you all here this evening, to enjoy a beautiful evening of classical music, or Prelude, as you can see here, working with some amazing partners to bring this form of music to the community. And where we take great pride in is that we're able to do it in a very eclectic manner, in a way that respects all people, all communities, because this is free and it's accessible. Yes, we're in the middle of downtown. Yes, there's public transportation not that far from here, but we're able to offer it for free and it's accessible. And that for us is very important because we know that not everyone has an opportunity to enjoy classical music or other forms of global performing arts. And that's what we have been doing at Grand Performances for over 38 years. In a couple of years, we're going to be 40. And who has been to Grand Performances in the past? Okay, so there's a good portion of folks, and we see that there's also some newbies, and hopefully we'll get to see you more. Because our mission, I mean, what we do is really about bringing community together. It's about bringing music and art to the people. And as we know, LA is a pretty big town. I mean, we're a region of 11 million people. And so for us, to bring a variety of art forms is critical, right? And I mean, I see this audience, I see LA. So thank you very much for making it here to downtown LA, because tonight, we're in for an amazing experience. Grand Performances is about experience. It's about creating moments. It's about creating memories. Ultimately, it's about bringing joy. And so thank you all very much. I also want to thank our partners, because we have tonight with us the Colburn School, and we have our amazing Colburn artists who also happen to be our neighbors right down the street. We have KUSC, which is an amazing, amazing radio station and wonderful partners. And you'll get to meet Suraj in a little bit. He'll talk a little bit more about the program. And so we want to thank them. We also have other partners. And please, we have the Heart of LA here, who have an amazing program, not that far from here, down in MacArthur Park. So please go visit their booth. Their intergenerational orchestra is wonderful. LA Times has done some great features on them, but get to experience that. Renee is over there, so do go visit him. We also have, as part of our ecosystem, my colleague Roger always talks about the ecosystem in terms of the arts intersecting with all the issues that make up this great city, but also our local businesses, our crafts people. We have over here, and hopefully you all get to buy some incredible cookies and baked goods right there, and we support our local businesses as well. So with that, I'm going to introduce my colleague, Stuart Irell, who is our creative director, our creative and artistic director, who is put together an amazing program this summer when it comes to our classical music, when it comes to poetry, when it comes to all the other music that we do here this summer. So without further ado, again, thank you all for being here. Enjoy. Take it all in. When the lights go down, this place is going to look fantastic. So, Stuart?
Thank you, Rafael. And welcome to downtown LA, this beautiful gateway here for music and the arts. We've represented all kinds of arts here, and we get to go back to some of the roots of GP. If you've been here for a while, you remember when the pool was over here. Michael Alexander loved classical music. He taught a lot about it. And so this is our return to those roots. And we have a unique chance here to also reintroduce some other people to the roots of classical music, especially through this series. We did the previous classical program last month, and we made direct connections from classical pieces to modern music. Everything you hear nowadays is supported by classical music. It doesn't matter what genre. We've listened to cumbia, we've listened to hip hop, R&B, we've listened to all this stuff, and you'll hear things that you recognize. If you listen to classical music, you'll hear themes that you recognize, and rhythms, and chord progressions, and phrasings, all this stuff. So in order to tell this story, we find some amazing, talented people. Like Raphael mentioned, we work with the Colburn School of Music, but also Suraj Partha is a genius at this stuff. It's been wonderful geeking out about music with him. So I would love to invite him here to take over the show. Suraj.
My goodness, it is so fun to see you all here. Thank you so much for coming on this Friday night. So I'm Suraj Partha. I'm a host at Classical California KUSC, as Stuart's been saying. If you've been tuning in this week, you may have heard me in the afternoons, filling in for the afternoon host, Brian Lauridsen. It's a secret. I'm on tape for these last couple of hours this Friday so that I could be here to do this. It'll be between us. I do want to take a moment to thank Stuart, thank Grand Performances overall for having me here and getting a chance to share classical music with all of you. And without going any further, I did want to introduce our musicians from Colburn, incredibly talented people. First of all, Eder Rivera on oboe. Jordan Farber is our bassoonist. And Hye Jin Park, our pianist. All right. Well, we have a really exciting program of music. How many of you, first of all, how many of you have never been to a classical music concert before or seen classical music in some kind of concert venue? All right, there's a couple of people. Sorry, you don't have to be shy at all. We'll try to make this as interesting and as engaging as possible. And I think one of the goals of this for me and for our musicians up here is to tell you that even if you haven't heard this stuff, you really have heard this stuff. And maybe even more, it's connected to the music you have listened to before. And so that's kind of the way that we'll go through French classical music and today. And we're going to give you context for these pieces of music. The story is mostly a straight line, but there are a couple of detours which we'll take. That'll be kind of fun. And I did want to start here. I think you all know what you're looking at. That's the Paris Olympics, which are happening right now. They're ending, I guess the closing ceremonies are on Sunday. I have been watching a lot of beach volleyball because of this stadium, which I just thought is just incredible, and it's like under the Eiffel Tower. And one of the things that's interesting about this is like the whole world is descending onto Paris for this event, and it reminded me of an event that happened over a century ago in Paris. And that was this, the Exposition Universelle de Paris de, I can't say the name, the year in French, 1889, okay? And it's very interesting. This was from May to October of 1889. And the Eiffel Tower was actually built for this event, to be unveiled at this event. And at the time, it was the largest, or the tallest tower in the world. Take you back. This is a time without the internet. This is a time without even phone cables. They were just laying the first undersea cables for phones between England and France a couple of years after this. So you're talking about telegrams and letters, basically. And there were exhibitions from a variety of nations all across the world. 32 million people visited. This is like a steel, what is this called? I forget now exactly. But the metalworks. This is like a whole metalworks exhibit. This is the exhibit that India gave. They had an entire sort of building. And then here is the Egyptian pavilion. And this is the Javanese village, which was built here. Now, I mean, there are some interesting things. Obviously, this is 1889. People are not necessarily as progressive as we are today. So this wasn't a perfectly authentic event, but it did have a performance of traditional gamelan music from Indonesia and the island of Java and the island of Bali. And one of the people who listened to this music intently was a French composer named Claude Debussy, who, according to a couple of reports, spent hours just watching these musicians play. And he had never heard music like this before. I mean, you know, you're in France. It's not like you have the opportunity to hear music from India or from Egypt or from elsewhere. So the fact that these musicians were coming here was his opportunity to hear something completely different. So if you look at a gamelan orchestra, you can see on the left here, they're playing mallet instruments, there are some gongs, there are some drums as well. And this is what that music sounded like, and sounds like today, in fact. Should play. So you get a sense, it sounds very different than what you might imagine an orchestra in the Western classical world sounds like. Now, Debussy, he was a talented pianist. He started at 9 years old. He studied at the Paris Conservatory, a school which we'll come back to many times in this presentation. And he's the composer of the famous Clair de Lune, which I'm sure you're all familiar with that tune in some form or the other. But he was looking at a way of connecting his music also with visual art of the time, Impressionism, the idea that you might capture an emotion or an impression of a scene rather than a realistic portrayal. This is a painting by Claude Monet. Now we'll return to that World Expo, but I hope you have that Indonesian gamelan music in your head right now, because you'll hear not exactly that, but what you'll hear is that impressionistic sound, this emotional image of a place, and this shimmering water droplets falling into a pool. And we'll hear that in one of the preludes for the piano by Debussy, Bruyères, which is a town in northeastern France. think over the course of this evening, you're going to realize these are like some of the best musicians in the city, and I'm not really exaggerating at all. Okay, so I think you may have heard a little bit of this connection. Debussy heard this music in 1889, and then he composes this in the early 1900s. So he's had 20 years of time to kind of seep this sound into his mind and his memory and his dreams. And then he's combining that with classical music, with the music that he's more familiar with in Western Europe. So just to take a second here, I had a teacher in music school who told me something I'll never forget. And it was, if you want to understand a musician or a piece of music, you have to understand their influences. So who did they listen to when they wrote that? Who are the people that they really love? And then go and find those people's influences. Who did they listen to? And you start to trace that back, and then things start to make a lot more sense. So we're going to do a little bit of that tracing back here for a moment, and we're going to go to a flutist, François Devienne, French composer in the late 1700s, and he was a professor for flute at the Paris Conservatory. This is over 100 years before Debussy is at the Paris Conservatory. He was a member of one of the large orchestras in Paris in the world at the time, the Concert de la Loge Olympique, and you'll immediately recognize the sounds of the classical era in one of his sonatas for bassoon and piano. And by the way, feel free to clap in between the movements. We're good here. To keep the Olympics metaphor going, this is like synchronized swimming and gymnastics happening at the same time here. For both of these musicians to be able to keep that up and stay together, which is just marvelous and such a fun piece. And this is the kind of music that in the late 1700s, the early 1800s, you would have heard in people's homes. They didn't have a lot else to do, okay? Like, this is the kind of entertainment, and oftentimes, you know, you were a royal, and this is the kind of thing that you were trained to do as well. And so there was a lot of musical training, and this music would get published, and then it would make the rounds, and people would play this in each other's homes. So you've heard a little bit of what the classical era sounded like. This is one of those chamber music concerts in someone's home. I'm going to take a second to just talk about where we're going to go in a couple of decades, which is the Romantic era of classical music. And simply put, if you imagine the composers of classical music like Mozart, the sort of way that they viewed making music was they're a channel to something divine, and they write and they bring whatever is heavenly, they bring it to earth, and they write it in their music. So this is music that's supposed to be refined to this high point. And the Romantic era, I would say Beethoven sort of ushers that in. He's much more of the belief that, no. This music is about us. It's about humans. It's how we feel and what's in our souls. The dark parts and the heavenly parts all together. And that's what I would categorize as Romanticism. And one of the people who composes music like that is Robert Schumann. This is sort of like the early 1800s, very talented composer and pianist. And in fact, his wife was one of the great pianists of the 19th century, full stop, Clara Schumann. We're going to hear some of his canonic etudes, a canon being a melody that's imitated by one or more parts. You'll sort of hear this duet between the bassoon and the oboe. And I want you to pay attention to the singing qualities of these melodies, how these melodies sing. Because from that singing is really the very beginnings of what 100 years later we might call the musical. Those kind of melodies that someone might break the fourth wall and sing to the audience. So think Sondheim, think Rodgers and Hammerstein, and then we'll go back 100 years and we're listening to Robert Schumann. don't know, I heard a little bit of Les Mis in the last one. In the one before that, there's a musical called She Loves Me, actually, that has this wonderful duet, and there's some bits and pieces of this language there. This, by the way, is the Leipzig Gewandhaus Orchestra House. This is the orchestra that Felix Mendelssohn, writer of Midsummer Night's Dream, he did the music for that a long time ago. This is that orchestra hall, and a fun fact is that this orchestra is still currently playing. They still make recordings, and this orchestra hall still exists. It's the longest running orchestra in the world in Leipzig, Germany. We're back to Debussy. As it turns out, Debussy, it's actually very funny because I did not actually know this until I was putting this whole show together. And we had already picked some of this music, and I discovered while I was researching that Debussy, in fact, took those Schumann canonic etudes and rearranged them for piano years later. And I didn't plan this. It just so happened that this was true. And so Debussy was paying attention. You know, he was listening to all these various influences and putting these pieces together. So we're back to this impressionistic sound of Debussy and his piano preludes, which can be about a place, as we heard before, in Bruyères, but also a moment in time, or in nature, or a character study. So we're going to hear two preludes now for the piano. The first is a prelude translated to, I'm not going to try and say it in French, but translated to Girl with the Flaxen Hair. And then the next prelude is the final prelude of the whole set of 24 that he wrote, and it translates to Fireworks. So first the Girl with the Flaxen Hair, and then the Fireworks. Wow. That's all you can say. A couple of notes. I mean, the fireworks that Debussy most likely was imagining in his head were the ones on Bastille Day in France, where, you know, they're doing all kinds of crazy fireworks. These are the fireworks in 1801. This is a print of an image. The fireworks years before Debussy was alive. Okay, we have to go back to the World Expo for just a moment. In fact, even in that piece of music, as you heard a lot of the scales up and down, you may have heard echoes of that Javanese music that you heard earlier. But this expo was not just a place for people to discover things that were foreign. It was also a place for people in France to discover things that were much closer to home. And that was especially true for the composer Maurice Ravel, who was a friend of Debussy's, a little bit younger. Ravel was 14 years old when he went to the World Expo of 1889, and he was very interested in his Spanish heritage. He was French, but his mother was Spanish, and he had a love of Spanish folk songs, which his mother would sing to him when he was a child. But he went to the Paris Expo, and of course there's this big Spanish pavilion. So that's another place to discover a little bit of Spanish music. And he wrote quite a lot of music inspired by Spain, including a very famous bolero. But we're going to hear now a piece in the form of an habanera. And an habanera is a style of Cuban popular dance music of the 19th century that, of course, has Spanish origins. All right, so we're going to take one of those detours I mentioned earlier just for a moment here and make some connections to today. There's a few of them. One of them is in the bass line, you may have heard this bum, ba bum, bum, bum. That phrase, which is sort of part of this habanera, this Cuban form, you may recognize the Bizet Carmen, Bom, ba, ba, da, ya, da, da, ya, da, ya, da, 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 do, da, da, da. So it's there. There's an Habanera and Saint-Saëns. There's actually a little bit of Debussy music, piano music, that uses a similar thing. But there's also this scale, as I keep this from blowing away in the wind. This double harmonic scale. Let's see if I can sing it. Da 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 da. That sound, which we tend to associate for a variety of reasons with the Ottoman Empire or Morocco or North Africa. It's partially because of the south of Spain, Andalusia, which there were many Muslims from Morocco that sort of came up into Spain without going too far into the history. 1492, Isabella, and whatever his name is. In either case, Ferdinand. The two of them, right, there's the Inquisition. They kick the Muslims, the Jews out of Spain, and they make the whole place a Catholic kingdom. But before that, there was centuries of connection between all of these various religions. And so this is a cathedral in Cordoba, in the south of Spain. And you'll see here, actually, these arches. There was a mosque here before, and they built the church inside of the mosque itself. The architects of the church, they loved the Muslim architecture so much that they just kept it, and they put the church inside of it. And that's kind of a representation of what this music is like, which is this combination in Spain of what you would imagine as the indigenous music of Spain, Western classical music, and the music of the Muslims from Morocco and North Africa. So we go to the composer Manuel de Falla, who was a Spanish composer. He's standing with one of the great guitarists of the 20th century, Andres Segovia. In his Miller's Dance from El Sombrero de Tres Picos, or El Sombrero de Tres Picos, yeah, Three-Cornered Hat, it's a ballet, you'll hear this same scale. So, and if you're also listening, you'll recognize that's flamenco music, or at least connected to the art of flamenco, which was very much influenced by this scale. As another fun fact, the scale has a variety of names. The double harmonic scale. In India, there's a rag, Bhairav, or you might call it Maya Malavagola in the south, and it's very similar notes and even similar inflections. It's very odd. Sometimes I hear this and I start singing an Indian tune that I know, like hours later, and I'm like, where did I get that from? And it's from this. You might recognize Rosalia, and you would find the exact same influences, flamenco, as well as this same scale again. So you're talking about 100+ years after Ravel, and then 50 years after De Falla, but all of this being connected to flamenco music. And that's Spain, North Africa, the Ottoman Empire, and France finding some kind of connection together through this music. All right, so that's one little detour. And now we go back to France with the music of Francis Poulenc, who actually couldn't get into the Paris Conservatory. They wouldn't let him in. It's like the story of, I think, George Lucas couldn't get into USC and then decided, you know what, I'm going to do some other stuff. And that's what Poulenc basically did. He just used his ears and was friends with all the people that some of the people we've talked about before. And what's interesting about him is he actually sounds like a combination of the classical era, the Romantic era, and his own, a couple of years after Debussy. And in some ways, that's because he didn't go to school. He didn't get indoctrinated into any one point of view about how these things should sound, and he borrowed freely from all the things that he heard. And so we're going to hear a marvelous piece of music, his trio for oboe, bassoon, and piano. And before we start, I just want to point out this quote, which I love, from a French critic. It says, "In Poulenc, there is something of the monk and something of the rascal." And he actually dedicated this work to the Spanish composer I mentioned earlier, Manuel de Falla. As you can hear in that, I mean, all the things we heard before, you can see how Poulenc borrows from all of them freely, whether it's the classical era or the romantic era or Debussy's sort of impressionistic mode. And actually, that French sense of freedom from Poulenc especially, I think it's much more profound and rebellious than it must seem to us now. That Poulenc is basically just saying, like, music, this doesn't have to be one thing. You know, we're not beholden to some particular view. We get a chance to do it all. And that leads me to our second detour as we get about 3/4 of the way through our show here. Francis Poulenc, we've heard from Maurice Ravel as well. And in between the two of them is a woman named Nadia Boulanger, one of the great teachers in all of classical music. We're talking the late 1800s, but she died just in 1979. So not too long ago. She studied with Maurice Ravel at the Paris Conservatory. I've said that maybe 10 times now, the Paris Conservatory. Very important school for the French. And Poulenc, like I said, couldn't get in, but Boulanger was very good friends with him. She was remarkable. She taught composition. She was the first woman conductor of the Boston Symphony, the New York Philharmonic, and the Philadelphia Orchestra. So she's really trailblazing. Here's a little bit of her music. So you can hear very much in this French mode of Debussy or Ravel. She taught all of these people. And if you know anything about classical music, just a moment, it's just kind of ridiculous. It's Aaron Copland, George Walker won the Pulitzer Prize, Philip Glass won the Pulitzer Prize for composing, Daniel Barenboim, longtime conductor, Penderecki, Mio. And I bet you with one name of a student that she taught, I can connect you to pop, jazz, and R&B all at once. She taught Quincy Jones. And there he is with his many Grammys. And this is not an accident. Like, I don't know. This stuff really moves me. And for real, like, he's paying attention. He played with people like Miles Davis and arranged music for Ray Charles. And a lot of he toured in France for some time, and then he actually moved to Paris for, I think, a year to study with Boulanger and to study how she did arranging and composing. So when you hear music like this, and you hear the strings, you hear the brass, then you connect that to the present. And I could find 3 things that happened in the last 10 years, some of them that just happened this summer, that directly connect to Quincy Jones and his string arranging. So you take the beginning of just Justin Timberlake's Push Your Love Girl. I truly heard this next song this week in the car. Omar Apollo is the artist, fantastic new R&B pop artist. Used to talk about you and I. And because it's Brat Summer and everyone knows that now, I figured I had to pull out at least one Charlie XCX song. Everything is Romantic. And this one actually has wind instruments in it, so you can hear there's like a wind ensemble under this.
Tattoos on leather tan skin, Jesus Christ on a plastic sign. Early nights and white sheets with lace curtains. Capri in the distance. Tattoos on leather tan skin, Jesus Christ on a plastic sign.
That dropped the first time I heard it. It's just like awesome. And this one I think makes the most clear French connection. And it's the music from The Color Purple, the main theme. Quincy Jones composed this score and arranged it. And you listen to this, and then you think back to the Poulenc or the Debussy and the Ravel. And John Williams a little bit. And just to make the French point even more clear, he's got like an accordion at the end, too. So, he studied with one of the great teachers in all of classical music, and she's like not even a degree removed from the people we've been listening to for the last hour or so. And that's really the beauty of this stuff. So we talked about Quincy's connected to everything. Miles Davis, Sinatra at the Sands with Count Basie. It was arranged and conducted by Quincy Jones. And actually that kind of makes our connection back. Because if we go to the cabaret music of Paris, the late 1800s, early 1900s, we're not that far from jazz, in fact. And so we have a man named Eric Satie. Now, Poulenc couldn't get into the Paris Conservatory. Satie couldn't finish school at the Paris Conservatory. So he got in, and he was considered by one teacher to be the laziest student at the Paris Conservatory. And in order for him to sort of make his living, he played piano in the nightclubs of Montmartre. And so we have here one of his cabaret songs, which I think you'll hear is very jazzy. It is Je te veux, I want you. Satie has got some very suggestive, racy lyrics even that I won't get into here. But again, you have our French sense of freedom. We have one final piece, but before that, a quick note and my ask to all of you in the audience here, which is trust your ears. This stuff is connected. And I have gone through, my life. I mean, all of you, you're going to encounter people who, with the best of intentions, are going to say that you don't understand, that there are things in music that you don't get, or that there are genres, you know, you're not ready for, or any of the other things. And without being too dramatic, those people are wrong. Right? You already have a lot of this education. It's in your ears. The music you listen to, whether that's music from your family, whether it's music from your friends, the music you listen to in school, the things you hear on the radio, the things that you catch on Spotify, it's all connected. And when you tell yourself, you know what, I think that this piece of EDM music sounds like Bach, you're not wrong, you're right. Those pieces of organ music that Bach wrote then, they're directly connected to the stuff that Daft Punk does. And that's for real. So I think, like, I hope that this show is an example of that. But I really, you know, hope that when you all go into your cars and you drive away from here and you listen to whatever music you listen to, that you just look at the people who made it and look at who they listen to and look at who they listen to. And then you start to figure out that this stuff really is connected and it all comes together. If you know this, you can hum along too, by the way. Hold me close and hold me fast, this magic spell you cast. This is La Vie en Rose. When you kiss me, heaven sighs, and though I close my eyes, I see La Vie en Rose. When you press me to your heart, I'm in a world apart, a world where roses bloom. And when you speak, angels sing from above. Everyday words seem to turn into love songs. Give your heart and soul to me, and life will always be La Vie en Rose. Thank you so much for coming to this. Of course, music by Edith Piaf. And I want to just thank these brilliant musicians on stage one more time. Eder Rivera, who's our oboist. Jordan Farber, our bassoonist. Hye Jin Park, our pianist. I'm Suraj Partha. Thank you so much for coming tonight.
Everyone, please show them some love. Thank you, Serge, for putting this together, for taking us on this incredible journey. Thank you, guys. Hey, if your kids want to learn music, the Colburn School is the way to go. Hey, before we end tonight, I want to bring on Roger, my colleague here, and just one last word from me. Not only are we connected to all this music, but we're all connected to each other. And that's a really important part. So I want to say thank you for coming out to support the arts and go out and spread this love for music and classical music and everything you listen to. Here's Roger.
Thank you, Stuart. So to round out the night, I just want to talk a little bit about how you can support grant performances. Everything we do here is funded by grants. It's funded by individual donors. Any dollar that you can spare to chip into the red bucket, we would deeply appreciate. Every single dollar goes toward the production of really incredible events like this. I think we can all appreciate how educated we just were on music. I learned so much tonight, and I encourage you to consider donating because it allows us to continue doing really incredible events like this. So you're going to see me and my colleagues walking around with the red bucket. Thank you very much.